Sorry about that. Took me a little bit longer to get online because my camera was blacking out on me as soon as I started. Okay, hold on. All right, I wanted to shut off my chat for a second so I could get a couple things out, and I will check the chat. Yep, audio's good, video's good. Okay, let's see. What are we going to talk about today? I just entitled this "The Collapse of the Human Realms," and that sounds pretty ominous. Doesn't sound like anything that would be fun to talk about, but we're going to talk about it. But we're just going to kind of dive into what does that exactly mean. And there's a lot of different ways we can take this. So when we go into our soul aligned realities, when we embody in our soul, when you see a lot of stuff and people talk all the time about soul embodiment, right? They talk about embodying in their soul. And maybe a lot of people don't talk about soul embodiment. And some people will talk about soul embodiment. So my camera's going to keep shutting on and off, but at least it's going to be, looks good on here even though I can't really see it. I have to just go on. I'm sure it looks fine. Soul embodiment takes on a lot of different definitions depending what realm you're in. You know, I've seen it a lot lately. I see it tossed around a lot lately. And it kind of can go into those metaphysical things that we try to force into a box to assist with our human realms. A lot of people talk about soul embodiment to, you know, enhance a human life. And soul embodiment and human life are two different things. It's two different templates. You can't use soul embodiment to improve your human life. You know, it doesn't work like that. You know, it doesn't go like that. You can't use soul embodiment for that. Soul embodiment is going to put you on your soul template, which is not your human template. So you got to look at they kind of both overlap, and your soul template can bleed through in a sense where you can kind of see it. And as your human template, you go farther and farther through your human template, you get closer and closer to your soul template, and then you eventually get to the part in your life where you're either going to pursue, and you made the decision before, you're going to go into soul embodiment, ascension process, or you're going to transcend, meaning you are going to leave this existence. You're going to transcend in two ways. Let me break that down. You're going to transcend by death and not ascend here, or you're going to transcend here. Okay? So you're going to transcend that human existence. You're going to transcend that human life. They're two totally different templates. So you can't take one and force it into the other. So just kind of have an awareness of that. And a lot of times we really don't have an awareness of that in the beginning because we also want to go down that path. It's also that trickiness to get us down that path because we want to use all that stuff to help our human life. I did the same thing. But when you get to the fall of the human realms, which is what we're going to be seeing, we've seen it actually for the last few years. A lot of the human society, a lot of the human systems are starting to show a lot of kinks. They're starting to show a lot of things that don't work anymore. You're starting to see a lot of people go against the systems and say they're not working. You know, you see a lot of people standing up for themselves and speaking up for themselves and saying these systems don't work. These are not systems that we agree with anymore. Now, is it a conscious act to speak up and kind of take your power back and not be dependent on these systems? Yes. Is it from an unconscious place? Yes, because it's still from an unconscious program, but it's a conscious act. And we've talked a lot about this. Where we do something consciously, but it's still fueled from a human program, like there's a victim energy there that we are kind of being taken advantage of, or we are playing into all these things and we were unwillingly lied to, right? But we are more willingly lied to. We're never unwillingly lied to. We know we're being lied to. You see a lot of people throw around what the human existence is. Is it, you go through the Bible portion, you know, of how humans came about, and not to get really stuck on the story or get really bogged down on how human life was created. I mean, it's just one story of how it happened. If you go with that story, you know, it was a fall from grace and we got human society in a sense. And we go with the Adam and Eve story. If you want to go from the galactic story where we're now in a galactic prison, you know, and humanity is kind of a galactic prison. Human form is sort of a galactic prison. We're going to go through different iterations of what that means for us. And it's kind of different stories, but kind of the same thing. They're not a different, they're not the same thing, is how I want to say that. Though I don't know if I said that right, but they're not the same thing. They are the same thing, but they kind of come from two different directions. Some people have an issue with religion. They're going to go more for the galactic version. If you don't really like the galactic version, can you think that's kind of maybe a little woo-woo for you? Then you're going to go the other way. If you're really into science fiction, that way might resonate. I mean, I know I've talked to people about the different things, and we talk in different forums about different things. And for some people, the whole galactic version, they really resonate with that. They go, yeah, that makes sense. You know, I really can feel that. That feels right to me, that this is kind of, we're working off galactic karma. We're kind of imprisoned here. It was a punishment in a sense, because you're in such a disconnected state, but it is something we agreed to. So there kind of is this thing where people forget that everything that happens was agreed to. You know, it's not that it happens and we didn't agree to it. We agree to all of it. We go through all of it because we agree with all of it. You know, I just finished watching season 4 of You, the show You on Netflix. And if you haven't seen it, if you don't want to know how it ends, I would have come back and listen to the stuff after you watch it, because I'm going to spoil it a little bit. But there are a lot of scenes in there that talk about human mental health, you know, how things get confused, how you feel like you know a person and you don't know them. And we've talked a lot on this channel about multidimensionality and how you can see different relationships you have with people all over your dream state, you know. And there's so many people I know I have relationships with in other multidimensional existences, but I don't have that relationship here. I might never have that relationship here. It might be people you see every day. It might be people you haven't even met yet. But when you start opening up to what you're able to see in the dream state and opening up to the possibility of the multidimensional realms and what you're able to see when you're sleeping, and eventually you can see it when you're awake too. In the beginning, it's mostly when you're sleeping, because our third eye is open when our two eyes are closed. And it takes a while for our two eyes to be open and our third eye to be open at the same time and not be distracted by what the two eyes are showing you. That's why we go through so many iterations with our eyes, as far as the crystals in our eyes start to pop and you get that sharp pain in your eye. And I know my eyes got scratched a lot when that was happening. Some people who really fight the process, I feel they have even more severe eye stuff. If they don't want to let go of what their two eyes see, they're so ingrained in that illusion that you can see, you know, retina detachments and all these other things that start to happening to take them off of their eyes, where their vision gets blurry and they can't depend on their two eyes anymore, and that whole illusion starts to crumble. That's why if we can't really connect, people say close your eyes. That's everything in meditation, right? Close your eyes, don't have your eyes open. There's a reason for that. You know, that's just not something somebody made up. When you close your eyes, your third eye will open more. And even in the beginning, you might close your eyes and feel like it's not open that much. You might feel like it's just open a teeny tiny bit. But work on opening it up. Work on feeling with your eyes closed, feeling everything around you. You know, feeling with the body, feeling with your energy, feeling with the senses, not looking at something and getting an immediate reaction to what that is. Because when you do that, you're going into your human programming to say what that is. You know, that's this. And if we go back to when I was talking about the season 4 review, I could look at a lot of things that they talk about mental health in there and say those are just the dimensions crossing over. And there's a lot of people who agreed that when the dimensions, they were going to let all of ascension happen very quickly. But when it happens very quickly, it gets very confusing. It gets very confusing as to what reality you're in. Do I know this person in one reality? I don't know this person in this reality. And when we don't have the time for it to go organically, we're not shown material to help us understand what's going on. Why are we opening up to so many things? Why do these things seem more real than our waking state? What's going on? We start tuning into this stuff. Why is it so important we understand? That's the reason why it's important that people put out content like this content or other content in the same vein, where you can be going through a lot of this stuff and understand what's going on. But there are people who agreed to come in who wouldn't see any of that stuff. They would not have any of that material. And when all that stuff starts to bleed over, in the human realm, it's going to look like people have gone crazy. Now there's a zillion different reasons things happen. So there's one reason is these people agree to that, and there are other people who play in those realities where it brings up the fear they have when someone says they know you and they don't, and that gets taken to extremes. But there's fear to clear out of that reality. There's someone who can stand in their power in that reality. There's a zillion reasons why all these things get created. So don't ever get kind of bogged down on one. Like it has to be one reality. When you start looking and peeling back what a human labels is one thing. What is it really? You'll see that also with autism. Children coming in with autism. Other people would call them rainbow children. They come in and they don't have the separation. So they feel everything. They feel so much of everything going on. They're so close to source consciousness in a sense. And all children are closer than as you go through adulthood, because you are kind of lulled back to sleep. I do feel like some people always stay a little bit more plugged in than other people do. So that's just going to be kind of where you are with that and how you came in. Some people come in and we're kind of lulled back to sleep. Human milk kind of lulls us back to sleep because it kind of keeps reinforcing the human DNA, reinforcing the human programming. So we kind of lull the kids back to sleep. Now we're supposed to do that. That's all. Everything is like agreed to ahead of time. So when you start feeling into a lot of this stuff, and when you see so many kids now coming in that they don't have that separation, they can see all the things. They can feel everything. As humans, we don't want to feel anything. We don't want to feel all the ancient feelings, things that are buried deep within our DNA that aren't about our human existence. But you are starting to see cracks in a lot of that. And you're starting to see cracks. And as the energy of the earth increases, a lot of people watch the energy index. And I can't say I watch it every day. I honestly can't say I really look at it very much. Because normally, for a lot of us, our human, we will kind of feel the energy changing. And by the time it registers on the energy scale, in a sense, something's already occurred for us, because energetically it's already happened. And by the time that hits, it's old news. So I don't pay too much attention to it, but it continues to increase. It continues to get more and more and more and more. And you're starting to see a lot of the human realm start to implode. Starting to see some of the financial systems start to crumble. You're starting to see how that creates a fear and how that trickles down. That happens because it has to trickle down. What scares people? Health scares people. Money, not going to have it. Scares people. It goes into the fight or flight. It goes into that root-based programming on, can I survive? Can I survive without money? What happens if I get sick? COVID was what happens if I get sick. Now we're getting into what happens if some of the financial systems start to collapse. What happens when my security's gone? What happens when all these things start to go? It brings up fear. That's why these things happen. It brings up fear so we can clear the fear. That's why all these realities happen. It gets us off the human systems. It gets us off the connection that we always have to be connected to the human system, that we can't, there's no other way, until the human systems are gone, which could take decades. Could take decades, could not take decades, but I don't know if it's going to take decades, but it could take that long, depending on how hard everyone tries to hold on to stuff. Now, we see the destruction of the human realms kind of beginning, and is it something kind of happening and going on every year? It kind of feels like it. I feel like you're going into another 3-year cycle where this one might be more focused on the financial status, financial issues, than the last 3 years were focused on health with all the COVID realities that came in. So just take a look and look outside of what's going on. Whatever you're going to be drawn to is also going to be mirroring what could be going on with you. That's why when we say the collectives have to clear certain things out of the body, certain fears out of the body, because on a micro level, we can't be finished with something until the collectives go through it, because somewhere in our DNA, we're still tapped in to that collective. We still have a DNA tie to that collective. No matter how much we clear on a micro level, through out of our body, we still have a connection to that collective. So until the collectives clear it, we can't really 100% finish it. But all these things happen to us on a micro level too. We go through the destruction of the human realms, our own personal human realms. And that's why when I say it's hard to take certain concepts and mold them in to how our human wants to view them, how our human feels about them, what it feels like to us. Why do these things feel a certain way? Why do they look a certain way? What's going on here? Let me really kind of delve into that. Let me really feel into that. Who's talking? Is my higher self talking, or is it my lower self talking? We go through so many times in our life where we don't even know who's talking. We're living from our lower consciousness constantly as humans. That's just all we did. We lived from a lower consciousness. We did not live from a higher consciousness aspect. We live through a human consciousness, which is a lower consciousness. It is a shell, in a sense, of what we're able to comprehend, because our human consciousness is always going to look out for itself. It is almost like it blacks out everything else. We kind of black out, and we just live our human consciousness, and we don't even have a connection with ourselves. That's why we want so many connections with everything outside. And you're going to see that going through on a collective level as things start to squeeze, and you start to get more and more things go on and on and on. It feels like you're in a loop of every year it's something else. Why can't we go back to where everything was, status quo, right? It's just not going to be that way. As each person starts pulling out of human realms and they're on a personal level, it's going to create havoc with the collectives. Because as you pull out of that collective, the collective gets weaker. That's how the collectives fall. And you're also going to have all these implosions within the collectives to push people out. If you're not going to go willingly, you're going to get pushed out. Because the human realms can't sustain. They're sustained on greed. They're sustained on everything that is of a lower frequency. We're always going to be talking about frequency. What's the frequency of this? What's the frequency of that? How does that feel to me? Frequency wise, when we go back to, if we want to go through, and they're both just stories. One's a galactic story. One will be a more biblical story. Don't get caught up on the story. It doesn't really matter. Some people have issues with religion, don't want to go through any of the biblical stuff. Even though there's a lot of energies in the biblical stuff that we will embody, part of soul embodiment. We go through Christ embodiment. We go through God particle activation. We go through angel energy. But if we have a lot of issues with religion, your higher aspects might call them something else. They might give you the picture of something else. Like for me, I didn't so much have issues with religion. I really didn't really have a tie either way. I really had no dog in the race with religion. I wasn't raised religious, so I didn't really have a tie in either way. I tended to have, even though I always kind of like Star Wars, I wasn't really into much of the galactic stuff. I felt like that stuff was kind of weird, right? When people talk about galactic aspects and going in that galactic, or going on that galactic journey to embody in our galactic aspects, that stuff always felt a little weird to me. But there is a point where your higher self will kind of bring it in. Like my higher self would bring in, like everyone will kind of get a galactic name. When you're going through that, your galactic phases, you'll kind of get a galactic name. And it kind of can embody in all your galactic aspects. And you can feel the power in those aspects. The detachment in those aspects, when you're trying to detach from human realities and detach from human relationships, those aspects are pivotal for that, because they don't have any type of love for humanity. It just doesn't have that. That's why we have to do the galactic work and the soul work, because we can't just do one. Because if you do the galactic work, you don't have the love for humanity, and if you just do the soul work, you don't have the capability to do that disconnection that the galactic aspects give you. And you get into galactic intelligence, you get into all that stuff that bleeds over. Everything that's happened as far as any major discovery, a lot of them came through the dream state, and a lot of them come through galactic intelligence. It doesn't come from nowhere. Movie themes don't come from nowhere. How many movies do we have about multidimensionality, for God's sake now? We have zillions of them. Everyone wants to talk about multidimensionality. But it's funny because when people watch the movies, it is an activation for them to watch the movies. So they're getting an activation there, but you also are going to notice that it's confusing. You know, everyone's saying people don't like these movies because they don't, maybe it's too confusing. We're going through time doesn't exist, and we have all this time stuff, and we have villains that can manipulate time, and now we got 100 versions of everybody, and I don't get it. It's too much. It's too much for the mainstream. Someone explained it the other day when they were talking about just multidimensionality about a movie. It wasn't even anything I would label as higher consciousness talk. It was a movie review, but it was like it's not for the muggles in a sense. You know, it's not for the normies who aren't really into comic books to understand multidimensionality. And in a way, that's true. Because if we try to understand multidimensionality from our brain, it will blow your brain. It doesn't make any sense. You have to feel multidimensionality. You have to immerse yourself in just being open to multidimensionality. That there are different versions of you living out different lives, different parts of you that made different choices, that lived a totally different life. People you know in one reality you don't know here. Will you know them here? Perhaps. Maybe you never will. Maybe you'll have a connection with them, but it won't be the same connection you have in that realm. Sometimes I'm just shown different people I have a connection with in different realms. So when you meet these people, even if you don't have the same type of relationship here, you can still feel that connection. There's a familiarity with people, even if the same roles don't play out here. You know, you might be married to someone in one reality and just an acquaintance in this reality. And when I say when things go too fast, and the people who signed up to go too fast in a sense, or go really fast, and they do kind of crack in a sense because they're able to see so much, but it's still being constrained by a very human system. And when that happens, you know, medication is given to try to keep things in order. You know, we always want to keep all the human stuff in order. So medication starts to come into question, and I don't talk too much about it here because medication kind of change all along the way on what some people will know they're supposed to take certain things for a certain amount of time until they don't anymore. Some people will know they have to wean off maybe all of their human medication. Some people never took anything. Sometimes it's going to depend on what feels right for you. In some parts of your ascension process, it might feel like this is what you need to do to support your body. I know I took thyroid medication for years, and for years and years I took thyroid medication, and then all of a sudden I just kind of knew I couldn't take it any longer. I had to wean off of it. I wasn't going to be able to continue to take it and my body do the purification it needed to do to get my body vibration up. So I had to start weaning off of it, and I could see, for me, I had so many years I had to kind of wean off of it, and that's what I was doing because I felt that's what I was supposed to do. But I don't get really too bogged down on if I feel like, okay, maybe I am supposed to increase, and then there's going to be 7 or 8 months when I keep decreasing more and seeing what my body will do on its own. Because your body does repair itself. We talked about the eye upgrades. Eventually, your eyes will heal on their own. Now, when you talk about your body repairing, when you do go through soul embodiment, when you bring in more soul light, your body it de-ages. It will start to de-age. It goes into the human template and the soul template. You'll play out your human template, and you could age up to whatever age that is, and then all of a sudden you start de-aging again. DNA repair does happen. It doesn't happen overnight, and I have a feeling that a lot of people feel like it's supposed to happen overnight. We're supposed to have this miracle thing where all of a sudden whatever I had going on is all of a sudden gone. You have to think of how long we kept our body in lower frequencies, how long we kept our body in human realities, all the karma we created, how long we lived as a lower self. And not higher lower as a comparison, just higher lower to explain. How long did we live as our unconscious aspect? We have to balance all that out by living as our higher aspect for that amount of time. And that means in everything we do, so we have a lot of balancing of the scales to do in a sense, and it takes a while for our body to recover. It can take years and years and years and years for DNA processes and repairs to take place. I've heard some people say that they had eyesight that wasn't great, and now they don't need anything to, they don't need contacts, they don't need glasses anymore. Is it maybe not 2020, maybe it's 2030? Is it perfect? No, it probably might never be perfect. Because if your eyes see perfectly, you still have a chance to be distracted and your third eye not be open. So you do hear those things happening. You hear people who have seen DNA repair go to a certain point, but it is not overnight. So a lot of people, when they kind of see that, everyone thinks that it can be overnight. But when you're talking about DNA repair, that does take some type of linear time, because you have to vibrationally cleanse the body. You have to get the body out of the human stuff. You have to stop worrying about everybody else. What everybody else is doing is not our business. Our business is what we are doing, not what everybody else is doing. It does not matter. If we spend all of our time wrapped up in someone else's business, really got to look at why we're distracting ourselves with that stuff. What's the story we have around it? Why do we want to continue to be distracted by someone else's life? Does it really matter, what someone else is doing? So when we talk about the destruction of the human realms and what we're going to start to see and what we have seen, just because things happen in kind of a human timeline. I've heard a lot of people actually use the word timelines lately, which I think is kind of funny. It's become a very mainstream term, and I never used to hear it. And now we talk about different timelines. I heard someone say today on a sports channel, oh, I don't like this timeline. I thought it was pretty funny, because I'm like, wow, that's it's not a word we used to hear all the time. And now you hear timeline all the time. It's kind of mainstream word. A lot of things are becoming mainstream words. Understanding what it means. Can you shift to a different timeline? Of course we can shift to a different timeline. We have to be willing to shift to a different timeline. And when we shift to a different timeline, we have to bring our body into that timeline. We have to bring our body's vibration where the timeline can create around you. You might see bits of that timeline coming in here and there, other ones trying to go. Where we get trapped up is we want to hold on to the old timeline and bring in the new one. We want to hold on to these certain things in this timeline. Oh, but I also want to bring in this other one, but I don't want to let this go in this timeline. I like this, and I want to keep this over here, but I want all this other stuff too. Doesn't work like that. That's why when we talk about soul embodiment and trying to keep a human life, it doesn't work like that. It's two different templates. You can't keep your human life and go through soul embodiment. Your human life will go. It will rearrange. Who will be left in that human life once it's rearranged? You don't know that 100%. And a lot of times our ego tries to tell us we have to let go of absolutely everything. We have to be willing to let go of absolutely everything. It doesn't mean everything is going to go. It'll shift and change. It'll morph into higher consciousness relationships. They'll morph from karmic relationships to conscious relationships. They don't stay in the same frequency. And if the other person is willing to do that shift, it's possible to shift relationships. If they're not, that might be a different answer. I have found personally it's easier to start over with new people in the frequency you were in than to try to bring people up from a different one. It's just you don't have all of the stuff to sort out, in a sense. You don't have all the baggage, because when we get into a new timeline, we have to remember everything that's happened didn't happen in this timeline. We're in a different timeline, which means we have a different past now of what we're going to glean as the past. When we look back over our relationship with a person, we're not going to see it the same way. It played out a different way, but if we keep trying to bring in how things played out in a different timeline, we keep bringing ourselves down to that timeline. Now, we do that for different reasons. We do that because we want to hold on to the story of we were really screwed over in that timeline. We want to hold on to the story that we were a victim in that timeline. We want to hold on to the story of whatever we want to hold on to. There's a reason why we keep playing out the same story. And you see it all the time. I mean, I very rarely watch the human news. I never watch the human news. I only will walk by, and if I hear the news on, I hear about it. But I do not watch it. Because it's always the same story. It's like it's fake news. You're watching, you're like, oh my gosh, we went through this story 3 days ago. Now we're going to go through the story, again, and we did it 3 years ago. We're going to do it again. There's always a victim. There's always this. If one side's going to take one side, someone's going to take the other side, and everyone's going to fight amongst themselves. And that's kind of how it works, and that's how it's going to go. And it's not going to change in a sense. It's going to go back and forth and back and forth. It's not going to change until everything collapses. And that will sometimes mimic your human collapse. So don't be surprised with what we're going to see coming, because I think we're going to see a lot of stuff coming, and I think I really feel like that the focus is going to shift a little bit to more of the human systems and off of the whole human health stuff. That's kind of takes the back seat. When you get into money stuff, you notice the health stuff takes the back seat, because money is such a driver to society. It is such a value system we put on things, what we think someone is worth, in the higher realms, worth is a totally different story. Your energy is what's important. Your presence is what's important. It's not all the other things we put value on in a human society with human money. So it's going to be quite interesting to watch how things have to collapse and how things are going to be restructured. So I am going to open up my chat because I do want to do that. Oh, hello. Okay. If I have a question, I'll take a question. If I don't have any questions, I'm going to, sorry about that. Sorry about that. I'm having a few issues with the camera today, but all right, we're back. We're back. So if I have any questions, I'll answer them. If not, I will end the stream today. I think it was pretty good. I think we kind of got through a lot of stuff that has to do with the deconstruction. Deconstruction is probably better than disintegration, but you're going to see a lot of stuff happen, and we're going to start to see the fallout of that. It was funny. I did see some of the banking stuff that happened yesterday because someone called it to my attention and said, "Oh, did you see this?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't see that. I'd much rather watch the basketball tournaments, but all right, I'll look at that." And I always kind of was drawn more back into sports and that type of stuff because it didn't have all the other connotation to it, and I could just watch it, and it was a lot more fun to try to predict the outcomes of the games than it was to get into the human stuff. But you could already see the people I was around were like, "Oh, maybe we should take all our money out of the banks. Did you see what's happening with the banks?" And it was just interesting that all that stuff people started to talk about it. I actually heard one person, I think it was actually on the news, say that they were trying to take out their 8 figures and they couldn't get it out and they were really in pain. And it just struck me as, absolutely unbelievable, that some things can be said. So it's just kind of comical to kind of see how people react to different things. But okay, I think that's good for today. So I will see everyone next time. I think I'm going to have to skip my stream on Tuesday. Yeah, so I probably won't be back till next Saturday. I've got some stuff I got to do, so I'll be out of town. Okay, bye.